My son thinks I'm ordinary. He thinks I live on coupons and good luck, that I stretch spaghetti sauce for 3 nights and wear the same gray cardigan to every family dinner because it's my favorite. He thinks I'm a quiet woman who files papers somewhere downtown and drinks instant coffee because I don't know any better. He doesn't know I sign paychecks. He doesn't know my name sits on 3 boards. He doesn't know I pay cash for buildings, not groceries. And I never corrected him. Because money is loud. Dignity isn't. My name is Lila Matthews. I'm 58 years old, a widow, and the mother of one, Jaden, 32. Bright, kind, a little too trusting sometimes. He fell in love 2 years ago with a beautiful woman named Ava Novak. They married last spring in a garden full of white roses and rented joy. I stood by, the proud mother, in a thrifted navy dress that I tailored myself because that's the role I've been playing for years. Modest, quiet, simple. It's not a lie. It's a strategy. I spent 34 years building a logistics company that started with 2 lands and a ledger I kept in pencil. I sold the company for a figure most people only encounter in headlines, not bank accounts. I didn't change my apartment. I did change my will, but my son didn't need to know any of that. He needed to learn how to carry his own weight, not sit on mine. Then came the dinner. The night I decided to act like a poor and naive mother to see who loved my son and who loved what they thought he could give them. It started with a phone call from Jaden on a Wednesday. "Mom, Ava's parents are flying in from Prague. They're staying with us this weekend. They'd really like to meet you at Il Bracciere on Saturday. Can you make it?" I could make it to anywhere with 4 walls and a roof. But there was something in his voice, a stiffness, a rehearsed lightness. I recognized it from when he was a little boy and hid a failing report card behind a drawing. "I'll be there," I said. "What did you tell them about me?" He hesitated. I could hear him glance at the doorway the way he always does when he's choosing between courage and comfort. "I told them you work at a city office, that you keep to yourself, that you're happy being simple." There it was. Simple. The word people use when they can't decide between pity and disdain. Perfect, I said. And I meant it. Because if they expected simple, I would give them plain on a plate. I would come to their table as the woman the world overlooks, and I'd watch what they did with that. On Saturday, I opened the cedar trunk at the foot of my bed, the one that held 40 years of memories, and pulled out an old church dress. Beige and shapeless, I unpicked a loose thread on purpose so the hem drooped a little. I put on my scuffed flats, left my pearls in their box, and tucked my hair under a tired scarf. I switched my usual leather tote for a canvas bag printed with a faded grocery logo. I glanced in the mirror. I looked like warmth that had been forgotten in a cold room. Perfect. Il Bracciere glittered the way restaurants do when they serve ego with the entree. The host greeted me with a trained smile that faltered at my shoes, then stuck. "Reservation for Matthews," I said. He checked the book, not the computer. Il Bracciere loves the theater of paper, and led me past crystal and laughter to a long table near a wall of glass. Ava, graceful in a silk dress the color of heavy cream, rose when I approached. She kissed my cheek, soft, practiced. "Lila, you look cozy." Next to her sat Natalia, her mother, the kind of woman who wore diamonds like punctuation. Her husband Victor had the broad, polished look of a man who believes everything is for sale, including people's silences. With them was Mira, Ava's younger sister, scanning the room for mirrors, and Uncle Thomas, who already looked bored. Jaden stood and wrapped me in a hug that meant more than every chandelier in the place. He smelled like the cedar of their new home and the basil of the kitchen Ava liked to pretend she used. He pulled back and searched my face with that crescent moon smile he still had from childhood. "Hey, Ma. Hey, baby." We sat. No one reached for my chair, and that was fine. I'm strongest on my own feet. The menus were heavy and French as a performance. I opened mine and let my eyes pass over the words like raindrops on a windshield. Natalia watched me amused. "Do you need help, dear?" "If you don't mind," I said, letting my voice find the smaller register I keep for nosy neighbors and nosier bankers. "I'm not used to this." Victor gave a small, benevolent chuckle and waved the waiter over. "For Leela, something simple. Pasta. No truffles." "No truffles," Natalia repeated to the waiter, smiling as if she had invented the word. I looked at Jaden. His jaw worked once, but he didn't speak. He's still learning when to. Wine arrived like a solution to a problem I didn't have. They ordered a bottle whose name was more vowel than consonant and discussed tannins the way surgeons discuss hearts. I folded my napkin carefully and listened. "So," Natalia began, that tone people use when they believe the person across from them is furniture with ears. "Jaden tells us you're public service." "Yes," I said. "I file things, count things, mostly make sure the right papers land on the right desks." "How noble," Victor said, more to his cufflinks than to me. "Stable, modest." "Are you comfortable?" Natalia asked, her smile sharp enough to slice bread. "Life can be difficult alone, and the city is so expensive." "I manage." "You learn not to want much." She purred. "A woman who knows her place. We value that." Mira tugged at her hair, corn silk straight, expensively colored. "Jaden, did you get the email about the club donation tier? Papa says if you move fast, you can get in before autumn." "Club?" I asked, small and curious. Victor lit up. "Oh, our family holds a patronage membership at the Lyric Row Club. You should come once as our guest. They do charity auctions. Wonderful art. You would see another world." "I wouldn't know what to wear," I murmured. You have what you have. No one expects you to conceal," she paused delicately, "your situation." Jaden's hand tightened under the table where only a mother would notice. He cleared his throat. Mom, Ava and I were telling them about your garden, the tomatoes. I smiled. I talked to them. That's the trick. Victor barked a short laugh. Huh, you talk to tomatoes and they listen? In our world, it is money that listens. My world, I said, is very quiet then. The appetizers arrived. Scarlet carpaccio, a circle of arrogance. Natalia narrated every bite like a food critic with a microphone. When she paused to sip her glass, she set it down with a little click and folded her hands. Leela, she said sweetly, we would like to propose something for the children. Proposals at dinner are never about love. They're about leverage. We're all family now, Victor added. And in our family, we like to provide structure. Jaden looked at Ava. She gave him the tiny apologetic smile she keeps for when she lets something bad happen because it's easier than stopping it. He took a breath. Mom, Ava and I are worried you might need me too much financially. There it was. The curtain pulled. We want Jaden and Ava to build, to focus on their home, their future children, their network. And we know a sweet woman like you would never intend to be a burden, but life is life. Victor nodded. So, we will help. A small stipend for you, enough that you won't call Jaden for little needs. You'll be comfortable, discreet. The waiter arrived with my pasta, as if on cue. It looked like expensive string. How much is a small stipend? I asked softly. Natalia waved her hand, casual generosity. 1,000, maybe 1,500, monthly. We are not cruel. We are simply prudent. $1,500 to disappear. They were trying to buy my absence in installments. I cut my pasta with the side of my fork because that's what a naive woman would do, and I said, "That's kind." Ava flinched, not because she disagreed, but because she understood what she had married into. Jaden stared at the salt shaker like it could teach him how to speak. Victor leaned forward, delighted that the world continued to behave the way he paid it to. In return, we ask for boundaries. No surprise visits, no requests for loans, no moving in. Holiday plans go through us, so there is no conflict. You get your independence, we get ours. And Jaden, I asked, what does he get? Stability, Natalia said. Opportunity. We are very connected. You'll make calls, I murmured. We'll open doors, Victor corrected. I twirled a strand of pasta around my fork until it looked like a question mark. And if I say no? He smiled the smile of a man who had never heard the word. People rarely do. Because there's always a price? I asked. Exactly. I set my fork down and folded my hands over that faded grocery logo on my bag. I could feel the old callus on my ring finger, the one from tallying invoices long after midnight, inflame like a memory. Thank you, I said. Truly. But I prefer my poverty on my terms. For the first time, Natalia blinked. Poverty? I assumed that's what you call whatever you think I am. It must be. You're trying to fund me out of your way. Don't be dramatic, Victor said. We're protecting the children. Of course, I said. And, if I may, yourselves. A long, soft silence fell. It was the sound expensive people make when cheap people stop playing along. Across the room, a wine glass broke. A couple laughed. Outside, the city kept breathing without permission from anyone at our table. I smiled at Jaden. Baby, can you help me with my coat when we leave? The lining catches. I don't want to rip it. He nodded, throat tight. Of course. Natalia lifted her glass again. Shall we toast to clear understandings? To true faces, I said softly, enough that Ava heard. She looked at her mother and then at me, and I watched a small, frightened bird wake up behind her eyes. The bill came in a little leather book that pretended to be humble. Victor slid his platinum card into it with a theatrical flick, then paused. He turned to me with a benevolent smile professional philanthropists keep with their watches. We insist, as family. It's your stage, I replied. He nodded to the waiter like a king who had just knighted a peasant and returned to telling Tomas about a winery in Tuscany where the grapes were massaged. I sipped my water. I waited. When the waiter returned, he didn't set the book down. He held it with both hands like it was hot. I'm so sorry, sir. Your card declined. Victor laughed, a confident systems fail laugh, and offered another. The waiter retreated, then returned with the same apology, more fragile now. Victor's ears flushed. Run it again, Natalia snapped, or bring your manager. This is ridiculous. The manager came. He was gentle and firm in the way people become after years of dealing with other people's anger at reality. Sometimes banks freeze accounts when they see international travel or unusual amounts. It's likely a security check. Victor stood so fast his chair scraped the marble. He turned away to call someone. The bank, a fixer, whatever number rich men dial when physics says no. Natalia stared at the tablecloth like it had betrayed her. Mira made herself smaller. Tomas finally looked interested. I reached into my simple canvas bag and pulled out my wallet, brown, softened at the corners, unremarkable the way a door is unremarkable until it opens to someplace beautiful. I took out a card that looked like glass with a silver chip and set it on the bill. I told the manager, split it however you like, and please add a 25% tip. The staff has been very patient. He glanced at the name on the card, then at me. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, then respect. Of course, Miss Matthews. He disappeared. Natalia swallowed. That isn't... It's a debit. Less drama. Ava stared at the card, then at me. Lila, who are you? Your husband's mother. That has never changed. Victor returned, expression smoothed back into charm. There's a small banking issue. It will be resolved by morning. Of course, I said. Happens to all of us. Once the city delayed my paycheck 2 weeks. Systems. I made soup from lentils and pride. Mira looked at her plate. Tomas cleared his throat, suddenly fascinated by the salt. The manager returned, placed my card on the table, and said, "Thank you, Chair Matthews. Everything is taken care of." The word hit the table like a dropped crystal. Chair. Not Ms., not ma'am. Chair. I tucked the card away as if the word didn't matter, but I saw Natalia's eyes widen in a calculation she couldn't finish. She hadn't yet connected that Chair Matthews sits at the head of the Laureate Foundation, which had recently announced a new 5-year initiative to fund local arts, logistics education, and women-owned businesses. She would. We stood. Jaden helped with my coat, careful with the lining. I kissed his cheek. "Good night, baby." "Good night, Mom." Ava touched my arm. "Can I call you tomorrow?" "Of course," I said, "but only if you want to talk, not because someone tells you to." Outside, the winter bit like truth. The driver I'd booked idled at the curb. I climbed in and looked back. Through the glass, I watched Natalia grip Victor's arm hard enough to leave a bruise, her diamond glinting like a small, mean star. As the car pulled away, the driver glanced at me in the mirror. "Good evening, Miss Matthews," he said in that careful tone people use when they know but don't ask. "Good evening, Andre." "Tough table?" he asked. "Educational," I said. He chuckled low. The very best kind." I went home to my modest apartment, white walls, rough edges, a plant that refuses to die because it assumes we're in this together. I boiled water for tea and set the bag aside without dunking it, just to feel in control of something small. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from an unknown international number lit the screen. "We need to talk. .n." I turned the phone face down and stared at the steam curling from my cup. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a person can do is assume. Natalia had spent an entire dinner assuming she knew my price. She hadn't even bothered to ask whether I was for sale. I slept hard. I dreamt of tomatoes. The next morning, my Sunday started with a board packet and ended with a surprise. I had a meeting across town at a community center the foundation had quietly funded. New computers, after-school tutors, a shipment dock out back for a program that teaches young women how to drive freight, not just fold clothes. I like walking through places where money turns into use. When I crossed the multi-purpose room, I heard laughter and followed it to the kitchen. There, in borrowed aprons, hair tucked under nets, were Ava and Mira. Ava looked up first and went still. There are moments in a life when you know the next words matter more than the last 1,000. She took a breath. "Lila, I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't know you'd be here either, but I'm glad." Mira flushed. "We volunteer sometimes. It looks good." I nodded at the rows of paper bags they were filling with fresh produce. "It is good." Ava wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward me, careful, like I was a line she'd been told not to cross and had finally decided to step over. "Last night was She searched for a word that wasn't humiliating or clarifying. A lot. It was honest, I said. She swallowed. My mother is complicated. So am I. So is the truth. Can we talk? Not here. She glanced around at the kids sneaking clementines from the fruit boxes. After we finish? I'll help, I said, and tied on an apron. We filled bags shoulder to shoulder. Mira snuck glances at me like I was a test she hadn't studied for. Ava worked quietly. Once she said, "The kids love the oranges best. They think they're tiny suns." They're right. Suns you can peel. When the last bag was lined up like a small, hopeful army, we stepped out into the winter light. Lila, Ava hugged herself against the cold. I owe you an apology, not just for last night, for the way I let things be, for the way I protected my parents from consequences and expected everyone else to work around them. I watched her face, open and frightened in a way that told me she was finally willing to be brave. My parents grew up poor, like dirt under fingernails, boil water on a stove pour. My mother swore she would never be humiliated again, and then she built a life where humiliating others is how she keeps score. It's not an excuse. It's a wound she turned into a weapon. And I have been standing behind her pointing at other people when she swings it. That's an honest sentence, I said. Ava exhaled. There's another thing. My parents didn't invite you to dinner to meet you. They invited you to assess you, to talk Jaden into co-signing something. My father needs a short bridge loan for a shipment. He's over-leveraged. He thinks Jaden's signature and your absence will make the bankers relax. Of course. Money is a net. People are the fish. Jaden won't co-sign, I said. I know, she whispered. But saying no to my father is like trying to tell the tide to stop. He thinks kindness is a weakness he cured himself of. You can't cure a kindness. You can only bury it. Will you talk to Jaden? She asked. Not about the loan, about boundaries. He listens to you the way I never listened to my own mother, and I want that to be our difference. I will, I said. But first, there's something I need to do. What? Invite your family to dinner, I said. At my place. Ava's jaw dropped. Your apartment? Yes, I said, smiling. I want them to see where I live when I'm not playing a part. And I want them to bring their true faces. I'll do the same. Ava looked terrified, then relieved. I'll come early to help. You're the guest, I said. I want to, she said. Let me. I nodded. 7 o'clock, Tuesday. And my parents? Invite them, I said, but don't warn them. She bit her lip. You're not going to. I'm going to cook and talk. She stared at me for a long beat, then nodded. Okay. As we parted, she touched my hand. Leela? Yes? Last night, when the manager said, chair, I Googled you in the Uber. I found the foundation, the shipping school, the grants. Why do you hide? I don't hide. I just don't advertise. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. I think I understand. When she walked away, I stood in the winter sun and thought about rooms and the people who own them. Some rooms you take by storm. Some you take by making soup and handing it to whoever is hungry. On Tuesday at 6:30, my apartment smelled like rosemary and roasted lemon. I had set the table with the good plates, not expensive, just kept. The flowers were from the corner stand that sells honesty wrapped in brown paper. The wine was from a vineyard owned by a woman named Alma, who writes notes on the corks like blessings. A knock. Ava stood there in jeans and a sweater, no heels, hair braided down her back, hands full of guilt and salad greens. "I brought arugula," she said, as if confessing a crime. "Perfect," I said. "Come cook with me." We tossed the salad. We stirred the soup. We laughed when the croutons burned and we made more. She told me little stories about Jaden's habit of lining the shoes by the door, about the way he hums when he reads, about the way he tucks the blanket around her feet when he thinks she's asleep, not because he's romantic, but because he's kind. I stored them in my heart like coins in a jar. At 7:05, the door knocked again, this time harder. I opened it to Natalia, Victor, Mira, and Tomas, all ready rehearsed. Natalia looked around as if the walls might make her sneeze. "How quaint," she said. "Cozy," Victor amended, which is what rich people say when they're trying not to say small. "Welcome," I said. "Shoes off, please." They blinked. I pointed to the rack by the door. Pairs nined up, sizes marked in Sharpie for nieces and nephews who visit on Sundays. They complied, stiffer than hardwood. At the table, I served soup in bowls with tiny chips I'd memorized over the years. There's something honest in wearing your history where people can see it. We ate. The rosemary worked its way through their defenses. By the time the pasta came out, garlic and olive oil and joy, everyone looked less like a weapon. Victor dabbed his mouth. "This is good," he said, surprised. "Food cooked by someone who loves you often is," I replied. Jaden smiled into his water glass. Natalia folded her napkin precisely. "Leela, about the other night. I made a proposal. I considered it." Her eyes lit. "And? I refuse." Victor leaned back, hands tented like a cathedral of certainty. "You are proud. I respect that. But you must see I offered you a monthly payment to erase yourself. That isn't help. That's a bribe." "Bribe?" Natalia repeated, wounded. "That's vulgar. So is the idea that my son owes you access to his signature because you speak loudly and travel well. But here we are." Victor's mouth tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know a bridge loan when I smell one. Yours is missing a plank and you want Jaden to lie across the gap." Jaden's head snapped toward Victor. "Dad," he paused, corrected. "Victor, if this is about a loan, I'm not co-signing. Ava and I talked." Victor went still. Then he smiled, slow and thin. "We will speak privately, son. You will speak right here," Jaden said, "because there are no private conversations about my marriage that don't include my wife and my mother." Ava set her fork down. I could see it. The exact second she chose the life she wanted over the life she had been trained to maintain. "Papa, we're not doing it your way anymore." "And what is your way?" Natalia asked, sweet and dangerous. "Soup kitchens and stubbornness?" Ava met her mother's eyes. "Boundaries and kindness." Natalia laughed once, without humor. "Kindness is how they keep you poor." "No," I said softly. "Kindness is how we stay human." We let the words sit between us a moment. Then I stood, went to the small bookshelf by the window, and took down folder. I set it on the table and turned it around so they could read the letterhead. The Laureate Foundation. Victor blinked. "What is this?" "A grant," I said. 5 years, $200,000 a year, renewable. For logistics training, job placement, and small business incubation in our district. Natalia's eyes narrowed. That's a lot of money to toss at people who don't know what to do with it. It's a lot of money to invest in people with less room to fail, I said. And it's not tossed. It's stewarded. Victor flipped through the pages, recognition dawning. We applied last year, he said slowly, for our import initiative. The foundation denied us. Because your numbers didn't add, I said. And because your plan created dependence, not jobs. It gave with a leash. He looked up sharply. You read our application? I read every application, I said. It's my job. Silence. It wasn't the stunned kind this time. It was the kind that comes when a person realizes they are not the only person in the room. You evaluate us? Natalia said, voice thin. I evaluate ideas, I said. Sometimes they belong to you. Sometimes they belong to a teenage girl who wants to learn to drive a truck so her grandmother never has to scrub floors again. The girl's idea was better. Victor dropped the folder like it was hot. So this dinner. What? You brought us here to humiliate us? No, I brought you here to feed you, then to tell you the truth in a house where truth fits. And the truth is that you're rich, Natalia snapped. And we misjudged you, fine. Congratulations, you're not simple. You win. I'm not playing. But since you like rules, here are mine. You will not try to buy my son's silence or his loyalty. You will not refer to me as a burden in earshot of anyone born from my body. You will not use Ava's love as a lever. Natalia's eyes flashed. Or what? Or you will find yourselves very lonely at holidays and very unwelcome at rooms I control. Which rooms are those? Victor sneered. Enough, I said, and smiled. But I prefer gardens. Ava reached for Jaden's hand under the table. He took it. A small earthquake occurred, and an old building inside both of them fell down quietly. There were a dozen ways that night could have ended, with shouting, with slammed doors, with performative fainting. But something stranger happened. Mira started to cry. Not pretty tears, not two neat streaks a camera would love. She ugly cried. Shoulders, snot, gulping breaths. Natalia gaped. Mira, what on earth? Mira shook her head. I'm tired of pretending, of calculating, of hating anyone who reminds me of who we used to be. I'm tired, Mama. Natalia went still. Like a queen hit by a stone from a child's sling, Victor looked from his younger daughter to his older daughter, to the woman he thought he could buy. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His certainty was bleeding out quietly into the rug. I stood and brought Mira a box of tissues. There's ice cream. It fixes nothing and helps everything. She laughed through tears, the first honest sound she'd made all evening. We ate ice cream out of mugs because the bowls were all in the sink. I told a story about Jaden as a kindergartner, how he hid ladybugs in his pockets so he could rescue them from the playground and release them in the garden. Ava told a story about forgetting the pie at Thanksgiving and how Jaden made everyone write their favorite memory of pie instead. Mira told a story about a summer in their old town when all they had for dinner was potatoes, but their mother told them it was a feast. Natalia smiled at the memory before she could stop herself. "There's a woman inside you I'd like to know," I said quietly. She looked at me sharply, and then, to my surprise, away. "She's tired," she said. "Bring her soup. It helps." We didn't solve everything. People are not equations, they're gardens. They don't snap into place. They grow, slow, messy, patient. When they left, Natalia hugged me, stiffly, then less stiff. Victor shook my hand like a man who just realized he's not the tallest man in the room. Mira squeezed me as if I were a buoy, and she'd been at sea too long. Tomas asked for the soup recipe. I said no. He laughed. We both knew it was a yes. After the door closed, Ava lingered. "I don't know what happens now," she said.
"Now?" I said. "You and Jaden go home. You talk. You tell the truth. You build the kind of family you want, brick by brick, meal by meal. And you visit on Sundays. Bring your own Tupperware." She smiled, wet-eyed. "Deal." As she turned to go, she touched the shelf where I keep a cheap picture frame with a photo of me and my husband, the one good picture in existence, both of us laughing mid-bite at a picnic where the ants won. "He would have liked you," she said. "He would have liked your mother," I said. "She's a fighter. She just forgot what she was fighting for." Ava nodded slowly, then left. Jaden kissed my forehead before he followed, the way he did when he was 5 and thought it made me invincible. I washed the dishes. I put the chairs back exactly where they live. I sat in the dark and listened to the radiator sing its old, loud song. My phone buzzed. A new message. This time not from a hidden number. From Natalia. "Soup tomorrow? I bring bread. No diamonds. N." I smiled into the dark. "Start with soup," I whispered. "Because money can buy chandeliers. But soup? Soup belongs to people who understand comfort and consequence. Soup is a truce. And if you're wondering why I acted like a poor and naive mother when I met my daughter-in-law's family, here's the truth. Sometimes you have to shrink yourself to measure the room. Sometimes you have to let people underestimate you so you can learn whether they deserve the version of you that doesn't fit under their thumb. And sometimes it turns out the thing they feared, the thing they tried to control, isn't your poverty. It's your power." Natalia came the next day carrying a brown paper bag and a look I had never seen on her face. Uncertainty. No diamonds, no sculpted bun, just a wool coat that probably cost a mortgage payment and somehow looked small on her. "I brought bread," she said at my door, lifting the bag like proof she belonged. "From the bakery on Orchard. To slice it too thick for my mother's taste. I like it thick." "Thick is honest," I said, and stepped aside. In the kitchen, we moved around each other the way strangers learn to dance. Careful, then easier. She watched me chop onions. "You don't cry," she observed. "I learned to breathe through my mouth and to cut fast." She nodded, then blurted, "I wrote something. I don't know if you want it." She pulled a folded sheet from her bag and slid it across the counter like contraband. It was on hotel stationery. The handwriting was tight. A woman who never lets ink waste space. I am sorry I called you a burden with other words. I am sorry I tried to buy the parts of you I was afraid of. I am sorry my fear learned how to wear a dress and call itself a lady. -N. I set it down carefully, as if it were the first blossom on a winter branch. Thank you, I said. Soup or salad first? She said, soup. Always soup. We ate with spoons and silence. She stared at the steam. When we first came to this country, the landlord put plastic on the windows and told us it was insulation. When it rained, it sounded like someone shaking a bag of coins and laughing. I promised myself my daughters would never hear that sound. I taught them to hear other sounds instead. Applause, crystal, the way people pronounce your last name when they want something. I taught them survival. I forgot to teach them mercy. Mercy gets misfiled as weakness by people who are still scared, I said. She nodded slowly. I didn't feel scared at Il Bracciere. I felt powerful. I thought power meant people didn't make you feel small. She gave a short laugh. Turns out power is when you can make yourself small and still be yourself. Turns out, I echoed. Her phone vibrated on the table. She glanced, then put it face down. Victor, she said, as if the name were a weather report. He wants to talk about the club gala next Saturday. We host an auction. He wants Jaden to attend as a donor. He wants you to stay home. That's a lot of wanting, I said. He says it would be confusing optics if you come, she added, watching me for a flinch. Optics, I repeated. Cameras that only take pictures of what you can afford. I reached for my mug. I'll go. She blinked. You're not invited. I was 2 months ago, I said. The foundation sponsors the community stage. They asked if I'd present the education grant. Oh, she said quietly. Of course they did. Come with me, I said. She recoiled like the idea had heat. To my club? After I... Come, I repeated. Bring bread. She stared at me. Then she nodded. Okay. 2 days later, my assistant knocked on my office door with a face I recognize from people who think a fire just started behind them. Lila, you need to see this. She slid a printed email across the desk. A bank compliance officer had sent a verification request. Attached was a PDF of a letter of support for a private financing facility, a bridge for Novak & Co. imports. The letter used our foundation letterhead and my signature. Only I hadn't signed it. I read it twice. It was a good forgery, almost affectionate in its attention to detail. The one mistake was a line only I would know to catch. The Napa address for our West Campus still uses the old box number. We'd switched to a suite number last fall. My assistant watched my face the way people watch a horizon for storm systems. Is it fake? I said. Who sent it? An intermediary. Names on the last page. I scanned. Tomas Trunka. Uncle Tomas. I picked up the phone and called the bank. This is Chair Matthews. The letter is fraudulent. Please note your file and send me everything you've been provided. The officer exhaled in relief you could hear. We suspected as much. Hold their file, I said, and please don't alert them until I've had a chance to address it. I hung up and sat for a long minute with my hands flat on the desk, feeling the grain of the wood. When people panic, they do stupid things. When proud people panic, they do stupid things and call it strategy. I dialed another number.
Victor Novak, came the smooth voice, the kind grown men practice in elevators. Victor, it's Lila, I said. We need to meet. Busy week, he said pleasantly. Gala prep? Now, I said. There was a small silence, the sound of a man deciding whether to perform power or recognize it. My office, 1 hour. Your office is loud, mine is quieter, 1 hour. He arrived exactly 59 minutes later, wearing a suit that wanted to be admired. He stepped into the foundation conference room and looked around as if numbers could be counted by furniture. Impressive, he said. You forged my name, I replied, sliding the letter across the table. He didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. His face didn't change. I had authorized nothing. I'm not the police. I don't care who held the pen. It was your ask. He chose silence. It's a valid strategy. It's also an answer. You're over-leveraged, I said. Customs held your last shipment. Your secondary lender tightened. You promised your investors a timeline you can't meet. You need quick cash, and you think my letter unlocks it. You think you know so much, he said mildly. I know just enough to be useful, which is why I'm not calling the bank examiner. He looked at me then, sharp. What do you want? I want you not to ruin your family. And I want the Freeport program funded. He blinked. What? I slid a second folder across the table. We start a new cohort of women in March. License prep, doc ops, dispatch analytics. 30 seats. $50,000 covers equipment, insurance, and the on-site test administrator. Sponsor it. That buys your silence? He asked, lip curling. No, I said. My silence isn't for sale. That buys you time to clean up your books the right way and tell your investors the truth without wrecking 100 jobs. In return, I call the bank and tell them we've resolved a misuse of our mark internally and recommend they allow your application to proceed after your corrected statements land. Extortion wrapped in charity is still extortion. Call it a deal. You like deals. He stood. I don't bargain with people who corner me. You bargained the second you printed my signature. This is the cheapest price you will ever pay. He stared at me a long time, something like hatred flashing across his face, and then burning out, leaving only a complicated exhaustion. I'll think about it, he said. You'll decide by 5, I replied. He left. The room felt larger. At 4:52 p.m., my phone buzzed. We'll fund your 30. Don't call the bank. ... V. I already called the bank. I will call them again after your wire lands. And Victor, no more shortcuts. I'm not your enemy. I'm just a woman who reads fine print. No answer. I told the program director to expect a wire. Sometimes victories feel like paperwork. The Lyric Row Club smelled like polished wood, old money, and a small fear that somebody would notice the cracks. Chandeliers trembled slightly in the HVAC breeze like nervous debutantes. Natalia arrived at my apartment in a simple black dress and flats but looked relieved. She held up a loaf of orchard bread wrapped in a linen towel. An offering, she said. Let's go get you in trouble, I replied. We rode together. In the car, she held the bread the way people hold flowers when they don't know the person on the other side of the hospital door yet. At the club entrance, a concierge in a midnight blue jacket glanced from me to Natalia, his smile calibrated. Names? Matthews +1, I said. He found us on the list, blinked, and straightened. Welcome, Chair Matthews. He looked at Natalia with a question he didn't ask. She's with me, I said. Inside, the music was a noble compromise between old jazz and modern donors. Waiters moved like choreography. The walls were lined with silent auctions, vacations, paintings, boxes full of sparkle. The donors had faces like currencies, some steady, some inflated, some counterfeit. I watched the little waves of recognition roll through the room as people realized the woman in the simple navy dress with the shawl like a night sky was that Matthews. I watched, too, as they clocked Natalia on my arm. Some smiled, some sharpened. Breathe, I told her. I am, she said, for the first time at this club. Jaden and Ava found us by the modern sculpture that looked like an argument between forks. Jaden hugged me, Ava hugged her mother. For a moment, the four of us stood there, awkward and wholly human, while the room looked away and pretended not to watch. The program began with a video. Faces of students, shots of classrooms, a teacher's hand guiding a shy child's pen. People dabbed their eyes in ways that didn't mess up mascara. Then the auction started. Trips went for prices that could fix a roof. A bracelet sold for the cost of a small house. People clapped. The clapping sounded like relief. Ava squeezed my hand and she whispered, "You're up after the scholarship lot." I nodded. I wasn't nervous. Stages are just kitchens with brighter lights. One stage, the MC, a man who had made a career of sounding like your most charming lie, announced the Natalia and Victor Novak Scholarship for International Arts. A spotlight found them at our table. Natalia froze. Victor smiled his practiced smile and started to rise, then sat again when Natalia put a hand, gentle, firm, on his sleeve. "May I speak?" she whispered to me. "Please," I said, and meant it. She stood palms flat on the linen, and the room did the thing rooms do when they're about to witness something real. They went quiet without being told. She didn't go to the stage. She didn't need a microphone. She spoke in the voice she used as a girl to call her sisters in from the yard. "My name is Natalia Novak. Some of you think you know me. I thought I knew me. I grew up where the sound of rain on plastic meant winter and the sound of an empty pot meant summer. I promised myself never again. I kept that promise. I also broke something else. The part of me that remembers what it is to be kind when no one is watching." A ripple went through the room. Victor had gone very still. He wasn't controlling this. I judged a woman I did not know because she did not wear what I would wear or say what I would say. I tried to buy what I was afraid of. I am sorry, publicly, to you, Lila, to the staff who served a dinner I loaded with poison and called manners, to my daughters, to my son-in-law who deserved better from his new family. People shifted in their seats the way people do when their bones recognize a truth before their brains allow it. Natalia reached into her clutch and took out a small velvet box. She opened it. Inside lay the bracelet I had seen earlier at the auction, or one much like it, thick, blindingly bright. She said, "This belonged to my grandmother," and her voice caught for the first time. She wore it once on my mother's wedding day. We sold it when I was 11 to pay a debt. Years later, I bought it back from the man who bought it from the man who bought it from my uncle. He charged me 4 times the price because he knew the cost of missing something has nothing to do with money. I was proud to get it back. I realized now I was proud of the wrong thing.
She closed the box, lifted it like a benediction, and looked at the stage manager. I am donating this, she said, not to buy forgiveness, to remember who I was before I forgot. The room actually gasped. People don't gasp in real life often. They do it when the story changes without their permission. She turned to me. May I put it in your hand? You may keep it, I said softly. She shook her head. Keep the memory. I will make a new one. She placed the box in my palm. It was heavier than it looked. I stood to. I'll match the sale, I said, dollar for dollar to fund the Freeport cohort and the art scholarships. But with one condition. You could hear 1,000 wallets lean in. Tonight, I said, we create a soup fund. No plaques, no naming rights, no donor wall. The money buys groceries and gas cards and textbooks and bus passes. It pays for babysitters during evening classes. It patches holes in real lives where the wind gets in. Half of everything raised for the bracelet goes there. The MC blinked, recalibrating. Then he grinned like a man who just realized the audience came to see a better show than he wrote. You heard the chair, he boomed. Let's make soup. The bracelet sold for a number that could start a small country. I stood with Natalia's hand in mine and watched something move through the room that looked, for once, like usefulness. Later, during coffee, a reporter with easy hair and hungry eyes approached. Chair Matthews, a moment. We're hearing rumblings about a grant scandal, Novak imports, and a forged letter from your foundation. The room tilted. Heads turned as if he'd thrown a glass at a tiled floor, and everyone wanted to see whether it would break. I smiled. No scandal, I said. A mistake, a misuse of our mark caught by a bank doing its job and a staff doing theirs. We've resolved it internally, and Mr. Novak has agreed to sponsor workforce seats that will bring 30 women into good jobs. That's the story. The reporter's eyes flicked to Victor, who was stone-faced, and back to me. No charges? We don't criminalize panic. We redirect it. He opened his mouth for a follow-up, then closed it. He wasn't used to neat endings that didn't involve combustion. He nodded to his cameraman and moved on. Victor stood and walked to the shadowed edge of the ballroom where we could talk without the music judging us. You could have destroyed me, he said. I could have, I agreed. But then your workers would suffer first, and I'm in the business of helping people who didn't sign up for other people's lessons. He stared past me at the stage where a dance troupe of scholarship kids performed a routine with more grace than training. I hate owing people. You don't owe me, I said. You owe the women whose tuition you just paid and the people you promised to employ. Keep your promises. That's the interest. He nodded once, a small, reluctant bow. When I returned to the table, Natalia squeezed my hand so hard I felt my rings. Thank you, she whispered, and her voice was new. Not the voice of a woman who expects to be thanked, but the voice of one who knows how to give it. Ava leaned into Jaden's shoulder and smiled at me, eyes wet. Jaden mouthed, proud. I pretended I didn't see. We left the club late. The street air tasted like cold pennies. In the car, Natalia sighed, the breath of a woman who had been holding one in for 20 years. I didn't plan to say any of that, she confessed. The best speeches are apologies disguised as weather reports. People listen because they can feel the front moving through. She laughed, surprised. You talk like a poet. I talk like a woman who has written a lot of memos and got bored. She turned serious. I don't know how to be different tomorrow. I know how to promise to be. I don't know how to do it. Come to Freeport on Monday. Help the women try on steel toe boots and fill out the test registration. Bring bread. She nodded. Yes. Monday felt like the beginning of a new calendar, like we decided to rename the days. Natalia arrived at the training center a half hour early, hair in a ponytail, face unpainted, sleeves rolled. She announced to the director, "I can mop." The director said, "We have a mop. We need a listener." Natalia listened. She held babies while her mothers filled out forms. She learned the names of every woman in the cohort and practiced pronouncing them until she got them right. She cut bread and buttered it for hands that shook with the adrenaline of starting. When one woman's sandal broke in the hallway, Natalia squatted, opened her handbag, and quietly handed over flats from another life.
Around noon, she slipped into my office and sat, back against the door, legs straight out like a tired kid. "They're so brave," she breathed. "How do they do it? How did you?" "You just keep moving," I said. "It looks like bravery from the outside. From the inside, it's usually just stubbornness and a calendar." She rubbed her eyes. "I want to help without performing." "Then help and don't tell anyone," I said. "You'll know." She nodded slowly. I'd like that. While Natalia learned to be quiet without being silent, Victor learned something else: compliance. The wire hit our account, the bank extended a smaller line than he'd wanted, and a bigger lesson than he'd hoped to avoid. The state regulator sent a letter warning about misuse of nonprofit marks in financing packages. He had to sit through a 3-hour webinar with a woman named Carol who pronounces ethics like a full-body stretch. He didn't call me. He didn't have to. The receipt was the apology. Mira, meanwhile, surprised us all. She showed up at the training center 3 afternoons in a row, watching the forklift drills through the glass. On the 4th day, she asked if someone would teach her to tie the perfect Palomar knot. On the 5th, she signed up for the next cohort. "Victor will hate it," Natalia whispered to me, terrified and gleeful. "Then he will learn to love his daughter more than his reflection," I said. At dinner that night, Mira told him. "I want to get my CDL," she said, hands folded like a schoolgirl about to recite. "Dispatch first, driving later. I like schedules." He stared at her, then at his plate. "You want to drive trucks," he said flatly. "I want to move things and people's lives." He looked at Natalia. She didn't rescue him. He looked at Ava. She didn't either. He looked at Jaden. Jaden took a bite of salad like he wasn't there. Finally, he looked at me. "You'll do this whether I approve or not," he said to Mira. "Yes," she said calmly. He blew out a long breath, "Then do it well." She smiled so hard, the lights in the room changed. 2 weeks later, the foundation hosted a small ceremony for the Freeport cohort's kickoff. No press, just families, program mentors, a borrowed speaker, and cupcakes someone's aunt decorated with tiny sugar wrenches. I spoke briefly. Natalia said nothing and handed out safety vests like medals. Ava took photos. Jaden stacked chairs like a man who understands every kingdom rests on the strength of its servants. Victor stood at the back, tie loosened, face careful. He clapped at the right parts. When the crowd thinned, he wandered over to the simulator and touched the worn steering wheel like an artifact. Mira climbed into the mock cab and beckoned. "Ride with me," she challenged. He climbed in, knees bumping, and let his daughter teach him which levers did what. For 10 minutes, you could see it. The man he could be when fear wasn't driving. After, he approached me by the coffee urn.
The bank says the letter will sit in a file for 7 years, in case. I hate that. I consider it an anniversary reminder. Every year, you can ask yourself who you were then and whether you've moved. He looked out at the floor where his youngest was laughing with women he had never imagined calling colleagues. "I'm moving," he said grudgingly. "Good," I said. "It's a long road. Pack snacks." He snorted. "Soup?" I said, "Soup travels. So does bread." He shifted, uncomfortable. "You and Natalia, you're friends now." "We're learning. Friendship is just trust with a longer warranty." He nodded once. "Thank you for not ruining me." "Thank you for not ruining you." Spring arrived slowly, like an apology that decided to stay. Natalia fell into a rhythm at Freeport. Mondays and Wednesdays, then I might as well come Fridays because the coffee is better here. She never took selfies. Sometimes I caught her humming. Once, in the supply closet, I heard her crying quietly. I pretended I didn't. Later, she came to my office, handed me the empty tissue box, and said, "I was grieving the girl I sold to buy the life I thought I needed." I refilled the box, and we sat in the quiet together. Ava and Jaden grew into the space they'd built. They started a Friday curry tradition at my apartment. Jaden chopped. Ava measured spices. I pretended to be boss. They asked me to dog sit for a rescue named Fig, who snores like a congested dragon. They laughed more. They fought better. They learned the shape of we.
One afternoon, as spring decided to rehearse summer, Ava called. "Can you come over? It's silly." "Silly is my favorite emergency," I said. When I arrived, she was standing in the kitchen, flour on her nose, looking both terrified and incandescent. She handed me a small white stick, like evidence from a lab. 2 pink lines. I stared at it, then at her, then at the universe. "Are you scared?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered, then simultaneously, "No." I laughed, and she laughed, and we did that for a long time because there are some moments you can only name with laughter. Jaden came in with a bag of limes, took one look at our faces, and dropped the bag. You could smell citrus for an hour. That night, when it was just me and my apartment and the plant that refuses to die, I pulled out the old shoebox from the top shelf of the closet. The one that holds ticket stubs and baby Keith and the last note my husband scribbled before he went to the store and never came home. I added a new thing, a photo of 2 pink lines and a date. I sat on the floor and cried the kind of cry that has sunlight in it. 3 days before the first Freeport class, the reporter with the easy hair called again. "We've got documents," he said. "A state warning letter about Novak misuse. Any comment?" "Print it," I said. "Add this. Mr. Novak has fully funded the March cohort and signed a compliance plan. We're proud of the women starting next week." That's the story. "You don't want to dunk on him?" he asked, deeply disappointed. "I want women to get jobs," I said. "You can dunk at your cousin's barbecue." He laughed in spite of himself. "We'll run it clean." He did. The headline read, "Panic, Paperwork, and a Different Ending." It ran next to a photo of Mira, hair in a bandana, grinning under a hard hat. At the club, some people called the Novaks reckless. Others called me naive. That's fine. If you listen long enough, labels peel themselves. A week later, I opened my door to find a stack of boxes on the mat. Inside, bread. Loaves and loaves of Orchard's best, wrapped in linen and labeled in Natalia's cramped hand. For the freezer at Freeport. For days when the courage runs low. N There were 10 loaves. There would be more. Bread is how some people say I'm sorry over and over without breaking the word. Graduation day smelt like diesel and buttercream. The women wore safety vests over dresses and boots under pride. They hugged instructors and each other and the forklift one of them had named Ruth. Natalia gave a little speech, not on stage, just to the semicircle of families holding phones. When we came here, I thought power was owning the road. Today, I learned power is building the road so other people can drive. Mira stood at the back with a clipboard and a pen, checking names like she'd been born to it. Victor brought stackable chairs because he'd learned from Jaden that every kingdom rests on them. He stayed late and carried trash bags to the dumpster without announcing it. He signed his daughter's graduation certificate, and his hand shook. Abba pulled me aside after the cake. She said, "We decided on a name if it's a girl." Grace. For what? I asked. For what we learned, she said simply. I nodded. The plant at home would like that. If this were a fairy tale, I would tell you that Natalia and I never argued, and that Victor became a philanthropist, and that Mara discovered she's a prodigy, and that we all go to brunch on Sundays while the angelic baby giggles and the eggs never overcook. It isn't. It's a life. Sometimes Natalia snaps at a volunteer and apologizes 2 minutes later with tears. Sometimes Victor forgets and reaches for an old shortcut. Then mid-reach, pulls his hand back like he's touched a hot stove. Sometimes Mira calls me because she can't get a schedule to fit, and I remind her that spreadsheets are just puzzles that think they're better than puzzles. Sometimes Jaden and Ava fight about the dishwasher and then count to 10 and then say sorry and then laugh at how hard this is and how good. We mess up. We start again. We bring soup. And if you ask me now why I acted like a poor and naive mother the first time I met my daughter-in-law's family, I will tell you the truth I couldn't have told you then. I needed to know what part of them loved people and what part loved appearances. I needed to know how much of my son's future would be wallpaper and how much would be walls. What did it turn out? It turned out that a woman with diamonds also had a memory of potatoes, and that memory was stronger than she knew. It turned out that a man who believed in shortcuts could learn to take the long road if you made him hold a map and carry the cooler. It turned out that a family is a project, not a prize. And it turned out that sometimes the smallest, quietest thing in a room, the bowl of soup, the slice of bread, the woman in the beige dress, has the most power of all, because it reminds people they are hungry for something money can't feed. So we keep cooking. We keep telling the truth softer than a slap and harder than a secret. We keep building roads and naming forks and buying boots and teaching bankers that compliance isn't the enemy, panic is. And when the baby comes and the house is loud and the foundation gala sends another invitation and the world tests us again, we will do what we have learned to do. Open the door, set the table, and measure the room by how many chairs we can fit, not by how shiny the chandelier looks when no one is under it. Ava's water broke on a Tuesday at 4:19 a.m., the hour the city forgets its name and birds rehearse being brave. Of course, she groaned, gripping the kitchen counter. The baby chose the only time I don't have eyeliner on. Jaden, somehow both calm and upside down, put the hospital bag in the trunk, then the stroller, then the hospital bag again, as if repetition could make labor optional. I tossed in a loaf of orchard bread because bread has never lost a fight, and texted Natalia. "It's time." Her reply came in 3 dots, then one sentence that made me grin in the dim kitchen. "I'm bringing soup." At the hospital, doors opened as if we were the first people to ever invent panic, and the nurses were there to clap. Natalia arrived 10 minutes later in a sweatshirt, hair in a ponytail, face unpainted, carrying a stock pot like a trophy. The security guard looked from the pot to Natalia and wisely said nothing. Victor showed up with coffee that tasted like determination and fear. He tried to give the charge nurse his business card. She handed him a wristband and told him where the ice machine lived. It was the first time I saw him small and useful, and it suited him. Labor is both infinite and a minute long. Ava's forehead shone, Jayden breathed like a metronome, Natalia prayed softly in a language her mother taught her on the days they had bocados and laughter. I spread butter on thick slices of bread and fed my people between contractions. At 9:38 a.m., the room hieroglyphed itself into a cry so new it erased everything before it. The nurse placed a small warm planet on Ava's chest. Jayden made a sound I had never heard from my son, something between a thank you and a surrender. We named her Grace. She blinked up at us like she'd been listening from the hallway for months and finally decided to come inside. Victor stepped back, pressed his fist to his mouth, and looked at the ceiling because if he looked anywhere else, he might learn something about himself. Natalia reached across the bed and took my hand. We didn't say a word. There are rooms where language would only be an interruption. When the nurse asked who would cut the cord, Ava looked at Jayden, Jayden looked at me, I looked at Natalia. She shook her head, eyes wide. I shook mine back. We looked at Victor. He swallowed hard, nodded once, and did it with hands that had learned not to shake. "Welcome, Grace," he whispered, voice rough. No shortcuts, only love. We kept the christening small on purpose, just family, a few Freeport women, our program staff, and Pastor Ruth, who could make a benediction sound like a weather report and a weather report sound like a poem. We chose the old stone church with the community garden out back and the fellowship hall that smells permanently like coffee and resolve. Natalia showed up early with flowers she'd clipped from her yard and 4 loaves of orchard bread wrapped in linen. Victor carried folding chairs from the basement and didn't announce it to anyone. Mira arranged candles along the windowsills and taught my sister's toddler how to blow them out after the service, which is a miracle disguised as logistics. I brought the christening gown I'd sewn from my wedding dress years ago before I knew whether there would ever be a granddaughter to wear it. It was simple and soft, with tiny embroidered leaves along the hem, the kind of leaves that survive any wind. Half an hour before the service, while we were testing microphones and smoothing tablecloths, the church doors opened and a woman walked in carrying a long black case and the kind of careful smile strangers use when they're about to change the day. "Chair Matthews?" she asked. "That's one of my names. I'm Leela." She introduced herself as Caroline Zhu, Director of Community Partnerships for River and State Bank. "The compliance team briefed me about everything," she said, cheeks pink with the diplomacy of understatement. "Your decision to redirect instead of destroy, well, it made its way around our halls. The bank's Community Foundation Board voted this morning, I preferred not to email. She set the case on the front pew and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a leather folio and a small envelope tied with blue ribbon. The board approved a 5-year grant, $200,000 a year for Freeport's Women's Logistics Program, tuition, childcare, and your soup fund. We're calling it the Grace Fund, if that's all right. I looked at the baby asleep on Ava's chest, lips pursed like she was nursing in a dream. That's more than all right, I managed. Caroline's smile softened. There's also this, she added, lifting the blue-ribboned envelope. An anonymous donor asked us to deliver it today. They bought Lot 47 at the Lyric Row Gala. The note says, "For the child who will learn what to keep and what to give away." Natalia's fingers rose to her mouth. "Lot 47?" she whispered. Caroline placed the envelope in Natalia's hands. The room held its breath. Natalia untied the ribbon, slid out tissue paper, and then slowly as grief drew out the bracelet. Her grandmother's bracelet. The one she had donated, the one sold for a number that made people feel generous and anxious at the same time. She didn't cry at first. She just held it like a question mark turned into a circle. "Who?" she asked. Caroline shook her head gently. "Anonymous." Natalia looked at Victor. He spread his hands. "Not me," he said, a little hoarse, and for once without the performance of humility. "I couldn't. Not then." She lifted the bracelet, and it caught the morning light and threw it around the room like confetti made of sunlight. "Then we do what the note says," she whispered. "We keep the lesson. We give away the rest." She fastened the bracelet around Grace's tiny ankle for the walk down the aisle, and we all laughed because it slid comically to her heel and then to the floor. And Jaden rescued it with the reflexes of a new father who has already learned the gravity of gravity. Natalia refastened it on her own wrist. "I will wear it today, and then I will put it away until she is old enough to hear the story." "Make it a long story," I told her. "Long stories keep people honest." During the service, Pastor Ruth anointed Grace's head and whispered a blessing so tender even the wooden pews softened at the edges. We sang the hymn about rivers and bridges. Natalia's alto trembled and found its footing. Victor's baritone joined late and steady. I felt the music settle in my bones like something I had been missing without knowing it. After, in the fellowship hall, Caroline handed me the folio, and we exchanged the quiet commitments that really run the world. Steward, report, show up. I found a Sharpie in the church kitchen and wrote the Grace Fund on the soup jar in big black letters, and then underneath, no plaques, just groceries. A little boy with jam on his cheek asked if he could put in 2 quarters. I told him it was my favorite currency. We ate soup, we broke bread, we took photos where no one tried to angle their face thinner. People who had never stood in a room together before learned each other's names without making it a big deal. I looked around at this small, bright crowd and thought, this is how wealth behaves when it's not trying to be seen. The wedding was always going to be a test. Natalia's niece, Ivana, 24 and shaped like an exclamation point, had planned the event for a year, measuring every flower by a ruler and every guest by a spreadsheet. The venue was a lakefront manor with ceilings tall enough to make voices feel important. 2 weeks before the date, an embossed envelope arrived at my apartment. The stationery had the weight of intention. Dear Miss Matthews, Per venue policy, and to ensure the bride's vision, we are unable to accommodate infants or small children in the ballroom. We regret any inconvenience. Seating for extended family will be in the mezzanine lounge with a live video feed for your comfort. Warmly, the wedding coordination team on behalf of the Novak-Mrazek families. Translation: no baby in the room and me upstairs with the coats. I stared at the card for a hard, long heartbeat and then called Natalia. She answered on the second ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone like a teenager who pretends not to be. "You got it," she said, before hello. "I did," I said evenly. "Mother called it elegant," Natalia muttered. "I called it a mistake." "What did Victor call it?" I asked. She was quiet. "He called it customary. He said it's normal in that circle. No children weddings are fashionable." "Then they can be fashionable without me," I said. "I'll send a gift and a prayer." No, please come. You are family. If there's a line to draw, I want to draw it with you standing right there." "All right, but I won't sit upstairs with a television." Her laugh had steel in it. "Good. Bring Grace. Bring the stroller. Bring bread." We arrived on the day early enough to be inconvenient. Jaden wore the only suit that has ever fit him perfectly. Ava wore a dress that announced her body had done something heroic and refused to pretend otherwise. Grace slept like an artist who doesn't show her work until it's finished. I wore navy and a shawl the color of theories and brought a paper sack with 2 loaves because apparently this is who I am now, a woman who brings bread to wars.
The entryway smelled like lilies and a contract. A woman with a headset met us with a smile she had ironed flat. She glanced at the stroller. The smile held. "Our lounge is just up the stairs," she purred. "The live feed has excellent sound." "Lovely," I said. "We'll be in the ballroom." "Children are not permitted," she said, still smiling. "Exceptions are," I replied, still smiling. She faltered. "Only with prior approval." "I approve," Natalia said from behind us. She swept in wearing slate blue and the bracelet, her grandmother's, on her wrist. It looked right there, like punctuation at the end of a sentence she finally finished. Victor was with her, tie perfect, shoulders squared the way men square themselves when they've decided not to move. "Miss Novak?" the coordinator said, headset buzzing slightly with the electrical charge of a brewing scene. "The vendor contract has an addendum," Victor said, smoothly, "filed yesterday. The baby stays." The coordinator blinked. She had not been debriefed. She glanced to the doorway where the bride's mother hovered, eyes wide. Natalia's sister approached with speed and perfume. "Natty," she hissed softly, "we talked about this. The vision is adult elegance." "The vision is family," Natalia replied, not hissing at all. "And I won't put my granddaughter in a coat room to keep a vision from blinking." The sister's eyes flicked to me, to the stroller, to Victor. "What will people say?" "Something useful, I hope," Victor said. He was pale, but his voice didn't tremble. "We paid for open bar and extra chairs. We can survive a nap." The coordinator evaluated the cost of arguing and decided to pivot. "Very well," she said, typing furiously into a tablet that had done nothing to deserve it. We can place a small family table near the side doors for ease of exit. Center, Natalia said evenly. The headset woman stared. Pardon? Center, Natalia repeated. Family belongs in the center. For a second, the room waited to see which universe would stick. The one governed by embossed stationery, or the one governed by chairs? The coordinator sighed the sigh of a professional who knows how to lose graciously. Very well, she said, typing furiously into a tablet that had done nothing to deserve it. If the baby cries during the vows, we will cradle her like the reason we're all here, I said. The ceremony began. Under an arch of white hydrangeas that must have cost a mortgage payment and a half, Ivana walked down the aisle like a photograph of herself. Her groom cried as if his heart had been keeping a surprise inside for months. When the officiant asked if anyone had reason these two should not be joined, I heard 100 silent sentences swallow themselves and become applause. Grace slept through the vows. When the quartet played the recessional, she stretched one tiny hand as if conducting. The guest laughed and then turned away quickly, because some emotions are too bright to look at directly. At the reception, our table was indeed in the center. The chandelier threw a net of light around us, and for once, we didn't mind being caught. The server refilled water glasses without studying our outfits. Natalia's sister kept her distance, and then an hour in came to stand behind us with the posture of someone who has decided not to fight physics. I was wrong, she said to Natalia's shoulder. I was trying to keep the pictures perfect and forgot the people in them. She reached up and squeezed her hand without looking back. We all forget. We remember. We do better. Speeches began. The best man told a story about a boat and a thunderstorm and the groom's terrible sense of direction. The maid of honor cried through a poem in which rhymes committed small crimes against grammar. Then Victor stood. The room stilled, the way a tide pulls back before something large. I'm not good at this, he began, lips thinner than usual. I prefer deals on paper and feelings in private. But families don't sign contracts, they sign up. He paused, hands flat on the linen as if testing whether it would hold his weight. Some of you know a piece of a story about me and a letter I shouldn't have sent, choosing the scandal himself like medicine. What you don't know is what came after. A woman redirected my panic into purpose, and a lot of people ate soup because of it. A chuckle rippled. I'm still learning, he went on, how to do hard things the long way, how to love without trying to control, how to sit in the middle of a room with my granddaughter and not worry whether the chandelier likes it. He lifted his glass. To Ivana and Petr, may your shortcuts be rare and your apologies fast. And to the woman who taught me compliance and kindness in one lesson, and to the woman who taught me how to wear a bracelet again and mean it, cheers. He sat. The applause wasn't polite. It was warm. Not everyone in the room forgave him, but enough did to make it matter. We danced. Natalia pulled me into a circle of cousins who danced like electricity trying to become a song. Mira taught the groom's uncle how to two-step, and then, when he learned, how to set a route in a dispatch app because she decided fun and efficiency don't have to be enemies. A little before dessert, The coordinator approached with her headset cocked like a question mark that had made peace with its shape. "I wanted to say thank you," she said, half shouting over the music, "for insisting." "We are good at that now," Natalia said cheerfully. The woman tilted her head toward a far table. "Also, your anonymous donor, he asked me to deliver a message." Our hearts did a small, ridiculous leap in unison. "Who?" Natalia asked. The woman smiled. "Anonymous," she said, amused at her own theatricality. "But he said to tell you the bracelet belonged to your grandmother before it belonged to jewelry, and to tell you that poor and rich are not opposites. Hard and easy are, and you're choosing hard beautifully." "That sounds like my father," Natalia whispered, voice wobbling. "He used to say things like that." "Then maybe it was," I said. She shook her head. "He's gone." "Some people keep talking through other people," I said. "Maybe that's the point." We stood a long moment in the middle of that beautiful, loud room and let ourselves be the kind of women who cry at weddings not because the bride is pretty, but because the world is complicated and sometimes decides to be soft. The weeks after the wedding unspooled like new ribbon, quick to tangle, easy to smooth if you're patient. The Grace Fund landed. We hired another instructor. The soup fund jar sprouted bills we never traced and stories we never asked to verify. The March Freeport cohort passed their licenses at a record rate. Mira finished dispatch training and started nights, which she loved, because the radios talk more honestly at midnight. Natalia cut her club appearances in half and her volunteer hours in half, again, until half meant most. She still wore diamonds sometimes. She also learned to love sensible shoes in a way that felt like sacrament. Victor met monthly with Carol from the ethics webinar and did not resent her as much as he predicted. He paid his workers on time. He learned to read fear before it made a decision for him. He started keeping cash in the company emergency fund, not because it looked responsible on paper, but because he slept better when he did. Ava learned to live in a body that built a person. She and Jaden slept when Grace slept, and sometimes when she didn't. They fought about the dishwasher and made up before breakfast. On Fridays, we still made curry at my apartment and pretended the kitchen was a TV studio where the only audience that mattered had jam on their cheeks. One afternoon, while Grace snapped with her mouth open like a joyous fish, Natalia came by with a shoebox. "The bracelet," she said, setting the box on my table. "You're giving it away again?" I asked, smiling. "Yes," she said, surprising herself, "but slowly. I'm writing the story down, every version, every shame, every mercy. And when Grace turns 16, I'll give her the box with the bracelet and the letters. She can decide what to keep and what to give away next. That's how we win against the parts of ourselves that would rather be impressive than human. We tell the truth to our children and let them make it lighter." She exhaled, relieved, like she had been waiting for permission she didn't know she already had. We drank coffee on the balcony and watched the light lower itself onto the buildings like a soft verdict. Natalia stood to leave and then paused at the door. "Do you ever regret pretending to be less the first time we met?" I thought about that restaurant, about the woman I had been and the woman she had been, about the brittle plates and the cracked pride and the way a lie had shaken the truth down from a high shelf. "No," I said. "Pretending showed me what was under your furniture." She laughed, then sobered. "It also showed me what was under mine." "Then it was useful," I said. "I love useful." She nodded. "Me too." At the elevator, she turned back once more. "You know what it turned out, Leela?" "What?" "It turned out I was the poor one." "Me too, until I remembered not to be." She left. I stood in the hall a long minute, listening to the quiet, which sounded, finally, like home.
If you're waiting for the moment the anonymous donor steps out of a shadow and reveals himself in a halo of peaceful lighting, you won't get it. He didn't. Sometimes grace stays anonymous because names would only make it smaller. If you're waiting for a catastrophe to return so we can all confirm we've learned something, I can tell you it did. It does. Natalia said the wrong thing on a Monday and cried about it on a Tuesday and apologized on a Wednesday and fed somebody soup on a Thursday. Victor signed a contract without reading line 14, porcupined about it for an hour, called Carol, corrected the clause, and sent donuts to the accounting team because sugar and contrition are cousins. We didn't become saints. We became practicing. And when I hold my granddaughter and she grips my finger with the furied certainty of the very new, I think about everything I used to believe power was: volume, polish, a view from a table somebody else set. It turned out power was something else entirely. The nerve to make a table longer, the softness that keeps a room from cracking, the courage to move a chair from the mezzanine to the center, the discipline to call a bank before you lie, the bread you bring when you don't know what else to say, the soup you ladle even when you're the one who needs it. It turned out the richest woman in the room was the one who knew what to keep: dignity, boundaries, work, and what to give away: shame, spectacle, and the illusion that money is a personality. It turned out love looked like compliance training and forklifts and folding chairs and a bracelet worn for one day and then put away for 16 years. And it turned out that the story I thought I was writing about pretending to be a poor and naive mother was actually a story about becoming a useful and honest one, which is richer than anything that fits in a ledger. We still end our gatherings the same way we begin that first piece, with bread thick enough to be believed and soup hot enough to be remembered. Somebody always says grace. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's Grace. When it's her, we all listen harder. If this story landed with you, tell me which city you're listening from in the comments. If you want more true-to-life tales like this, subscribe and tap the bell. Your support and super thanks helps me keep bringing you long, thoughtful stories that travel. On your screen, you'll see 2 more life stories I recommend. See you in the next one, with love and respect.